Hello, everybody. Once again, we are back here, and we are back in video or class number 8 in this remarkable series, God Questions. I want to thank you for joining in once again. If this is your first time, my name is Pat McDonald, and I'm the one who has the privilege of sharing this with you. I have a question for you today from God. I pray that you will enjoy it. Again, if this is your first time, this God Question series, it's been quite remarkable for me. I am one of those who've always had questions for God. But this concept that God has questions for me was a fairly remarkable revelation for me. And I'm just really thankful for it because, as we have said in these other classes, when we ask questions, we're seeking information. We're seeking answers. But when God's asking questions, He's not seeking answers. He's not looking for information. He's God. He has all the answers. He knows all the information. His reason is to get us thinking out of our little box, get us out of our little groove or mindset, and start seeing something from a different perspective. So that's what at least has been my observation in these studies, that God taps us on the shoulders and says, "Hey, Pat," or "Hey, John," or "Hey, Bob," or "Hey, Sue, have you thought of this?" Or whatever the question is He asks. So the goal of this series is really to help each of us to understand this idea that God is asking us questions, prodding us. And number 2 is to discover these many questions that God asks, and most importantly for us in your class, in your Connect group, to further unpack and discuss what it is that God is wanting us to see in His questioning, in His bringing us out of our groove, out of our little box, into a whole new place, a whole new perspective, on a whole new path. So we hope you'll enjoy these. Hope you enjoy this question for us today. So today's question, John chapter 5, verse 6, reading out of the New Living Translation. It says, "When Jesus saw him and knew he had been ill for a long time, Jesus asked him, 'Would you like to get well?'" Whew. That's an interesting question. That was chapter 5, verse 6. Starting with verse 1, a little background to this dialogue. Jesus sometime later went up to Jerusalem for one of the Jewish festivals or feasts. Now there was in Jerusalem, verse 2, there was in Jerusalem near the sheep gate a pool, which in the Aramaic language is called Bethesda, and which is surrounded by 5 covered colonnades or porches. Here a great number of disabled people used to lie. They were the blind, the lame, the paralyzed. These were people who were physically infirmed and disabled. Verse 5, one who was there had been an invalid, had been ill for 38 years. Now at this point, Jesus asks this man a very simple question. Would you like to get well? You'll notice that Jesus didn't ask him about the process of the healing at the pool. He didn't ask him about the bubbles or the water, being stirred by the angels, He simply asked him a question of great simplicity. He asked him, "Do you want to be healed?" You see, at this pool at Bethesda, these people were there waiting because apparently an angel would come down periodically and stir the waters, troubling the waters. And when that occurred, the first one in the pool would be healed. Okay, and this guy had been there he'd been sick for 38 years. He had been there seeking healing for a long time. And Jesus didn't ask them about the process. He didn't ask them about the lack of fairness or justice that the man couldn't seem to receive this opportunity to get in the pool. Others would get in there before him. Others had not respected how long he had been there. So there could be issues of justice. There was a lot of issues involved. Jesus didn't ask him about any of those details. He simply asked him, would you like to get well? Other translations in the Amplified, it says, do you want to get well? The CEV says, do you want to be healed? The King James says, wilt thou be made whole? And the Passion Translation says it with a little bit more insight. It says, do you truly long to be healed? Now that word there, would you like or wilt thou, it's really referring to desire. It's really referring to, are you willing or do you intend, do you truly long? Do you wish to be made whole? And that word whole means healthy, true, sound, whole. And what's really interesting is Jesus asks him the simple question, but the man really didn't answer the question. Instead, he went into all the details surrounding the situation. He went into all the reasons why it hasn't happened or why it can't happen. And maybe even probably all the reasons why it won't happen. In fact, interestingly, in the New Living Translation, the man's first response was, when Jesus said, do you want to be healed? The first response was, I can't. As the story goes on, after Jesus has healed this man, and I need to note that Jesus healed the man. It wasn't this angelic stirring of the water, right? As the story goes on, after Jesus heals this man, he tells him to get up, take his mat, and walk, and immediately he's healed. And shortly later, the religious leaders see this guy on the Sabbath carrying his sleeping mat, and they give him a hard time. He's violated the Sabbath. He's doing work. He's carrying his mat. And then we found out that this guy, after he found out the identity of the one who healed him, after he found out it was Jesus, this guy went back and told the religious leaders that it was Jesus that healed him. Now, it just kind of seemed like he threw him under the bus. Now, we don't really know. Could be that it was early in Jesus' ministry and it wasn't public knowledge that the religious leaders would be against Jesus, and that by telling the religious leaders that Jesus had healed him, that this guy would be putting Jesus in some sort of jeopardy. But it is a little suspect that Jesus heals this guy, and he goes and tells the religious leaders that it's Jesus that healed him. But back to the dialogue between he and Jesus. The man really didn't answer the question, did he? Instead, he went into all the reasons why it hasn't happened, can't happen, and probably won't happen. Now, I don't mean to be insensitive to this poor fellow. A very sad story, 38 years suffering from this ailment. But when you really look at the guy's response to Jesus, or put it this way, when I respond to the Lord's challenges like this guy did, it sounds a lot like excuses. You see, the man didn't seem to really have any problem believing that God could heal. He didn't seem to have a disconnect with the fact that God has healed. He didn't seem to question whether this angelic process at the pool really happens. I mean, it actually sounds like he'd witnessed it happen on many occasions, just couldn't be a part. Kind of sounds like excuses. In fact, in some cases, it sounds like this guy's like blaming. Like he says, I can't because I don't have anybody who will help me down. His lack was he didn't have somebody. It also sounds like he's blaming others for his lack of healing. He said, someone else always gets there in front of me. And again, I don't mean to be criticizing this guy. Frankly, it reminds me a lot of when the Lord's put his finger in areas of my life. I always seem to avoid the simple question and always seem to get caught up in the details of all the surrounding stuff. Sounds like me. Does it sound like us? Certainly there are many who don't believe in Jesus, that he heals today. I understand that in our culture today. But I don't think that's who I'm talking to today. We believe that God heals. And I think I can speak for just about every one of you. We've seen God heal. In fact, probably every one of us have had God heal us. But today's struggle, sometimes the real struggle in our heart when God asks this, the question is, do you want to be healed? The real struggle is believing that God will heal me. Do we believe that God will heal us? I don't think this question or these questions are just referring to physical healing either. I think he is applying it to our whole being, our spirit, our soul, and our body. So I leave you with this question here. Would you like to get well? Do you long to be whole? Do we believe that God will heal us? Discuss it. Discuss it among yourselves. Don't be afraid to be transparent. Don't be afraid to share your feelings, because I believe that's how God's going to unpack this for us and bring us to the place he wants us to be, so that our answer can be yes, I want to be healed, and we can see God heal us, touch our lives, and bring us into the next place where he wants to bring us. So discuss this, and we'll talk to you next week.